why has this nomenclature changed? What is it that has made the word boy now mean girl, the word girl now mean boy, or was it, like possibly I alleged at the end of the female woman lecture? The word patriarch means the father or head male of a family or tribe, and in the Christian Bible, of course, it was Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, examples of patriarchal or patriarchacy. We presently live in, and for some time have lived under, a patriarchal society or male-ruled society here in the United States, male Caucasoid dominant. The Bible says that Adam was the first man and that the Lord God did create him and that he placed him in a seemingly tropical paradise because he might become lonely, and made for him other animals and finally a helpmeet, which was womb man. Because of this emphasis placed on man by the Lord God, religions and nations and political societies have accepted this planet-venerated man, and the church specifically says again that he is divine and the rightful ruler of all things, and that they were made for him and under him to control. Now some things have happened in our society which threaten the male where he lives. Instead of a male man, we now have a male person. And I know you say, but it's spelled M-A-I-L. Well, at one time that M-A-I-L really stood for M-A-L-E because there were very few letter carriers that were female. That's changed in the last 40 years. There, instead of a chairman of the board, there's now a chairperson. A congressman is a representative. Mankind is now human being, and a policeman is an officer of the law, and you understand all the things that have really come into being over the last 15 years. Believe it or not, this has changed over the last 15 years. This is not an old subjugated thing. We were very patriarchal here, not only on earth, but especially in this country for a long time. We have homosexuality rearing its sexual head, and we now have AIDS threatening homosexuality. We have all kinds of divisions of mind as to who and what is right and what is man. And I say because of all of this, once you begin to question your thought and your concept, you begin to change that presence that is around you. Now, whether it was like the chicken and egg, that the thought had to be changed in the air and consciousness that we exist in, or whether or not as we change the air and the consciousness around us, is up to you to choose. But man has begun to change. And the word man, as understood, is definitely changing. Everything that I stated in the woman lecture, to save some time, pretty much holds true in the man lecture, especially as it is associated with woman and the woman lecture again. One thing with the ravages of old age, with ulcers, diabetes, and heart attacks, and so on and so forth, it is becoming hard for either sex to exist well, and man on earth feels himself somewhat now threatened. I state, since it was brought out before, and I was going to skirt this, but I won't. I'll tell this now, especially since the question of biblical theology was mentioned. I will look at this and interpret another way. Some of you who are Hebrew Israelites already agree to it. Some of you Islamic agree to part of it, and I'll run through this briefly, and then we'll see if we need to go over it again. If we state that in the first chapter of Genesis, that in the 26th verse it says, God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over, and then etc., etc. And that in Genesis 26 verse, it then says also, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female, we have here then a God creating a male and female at the same time and calling them mutually man. Later, a Lord God, and the two terms are used individually, creating another man and calling him Adam. And this is where the trouble really starts, what the modern theologists and preferably the theosophists are calling the second creation, or Adam 2, or colloquial again, Adam 1, 2's offspring. We have to then look at one basic thing, the Hebrew word for Adam, which means red clay. That Adamic man was physically formed from earth-found ingredients, and at that time there was a lot of clay structure everywhere on earth. The Hebrew word Yahweh was interpreted as Lord God, and from the tetragrammation YVHV, or Yahweh, the Hebrew word Yehovah, past, present, and future, that's what the phrase means, was interpreted as God. That the Bible is based in generally on Hebrew scholars and scribes' interpretation of Oriental philosophy for a chosen people which were for to come. These scribes were called Masors or Masoretes, and they wrote what is called the Masoretic text. Therefore, we now have a universally created, self-contained, parthenogenic, higher consciousness God created man, partially absorbed and identified on a single planet, expressly Lord-made lesser entity whose ability to reproduce itself as a God was lost, was then polarized, making the divine principle separate in two distinct bodies called male and female. This new and lesser creature was called by the ancient ones human, under the god Hubris, or animal self, animal god, which was depicted by the Sphinx. Since they now have found sphinxes throughout the earth, and sphinx on the moon and sphinx on Mars, all with the hue quality, animal quality, and since some look negroid and only a few look Caucasoid, we have a challenge of interpretation and possibly a need for great research. I quote that in Genesis 1st and 2nd chapters, and it came to pass, which means after some time had passed, when man began to multiply on the face of earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took of them wives of all of which they chose, and there was born to them mighty men, and there were giants in the earth. Now, if any kind of logic can be applied to that reference, that biblical reference, it means a primordial race of people born of God, the sons of God, had no daughters or distinctly separate females amongst them, took to themselves those completely polarized units called females that were on earth, and eventually lost the female quality within themselves, and they were no longer hermaphrodites. They produced at first all females, and later on some males who were incomplete were produced and had to fight hard to continue to propagate their kind through operative circumcision as their prostrate tried to become a womb, and again they had a sheath over the penis much as the clitoris had, and they had to be cut back in order to let this extended species exist as a self-contained person. The male reproductive organs called phallus or penis, prostate and testes, scrotum and orchic, and there is your key as a male, orchic, are similar in many cases to what is found in the female. The female fallopian tubes, again, resemble the male vas deferens glands. The male prostate, not prostrate, Prostrate is to prostrate oneself in front of, on the ground, or at a lower angle. Prostrate means to stand in front of alone. There also was a key which they hid from you. Every man has the rudimentary mammary glands of a female and can produce milk. And the bulbourethral glands of the male are equal to what is called the larger vestibular glands in woman. The same thing that I stated just backwards as when we gave the woman lecture. The elongated clitoris, when stimulated and or genetically mutated, becomes the penis. And the testes found within the scrotum is nothing more than a descended ovum. I repeat again, the keys here. Prostate means to stand in front of. Prostrate means to lie flat with your face downward. The prostate gland stands in front of the male urethra and in front of the bladder and ahead of the orchic gland. The reason why a man has prostate trouble can be seen when you understand that the atrophied womb is not complete, and the orchic gland, through its radiations, causes live sperm to be produced only within that sac and makes a man separate from a womb man. Understand this collective title, man, met a interactive species or hermaphrodites that later on in the fall of man was called Adam II, separate species with separate sexual reproductive organs. One following the menses of the animals of earth, but if man was a God-man, there are planets without moons and consequently could not have mensing animals. Animals follow the cycle of a orbiting satellite. Man follows wherever the planet leads and is free to go to the many classrooms in the heavens. You didn't understand what I said, did you? How many did? That's beautiful. How many partially did, but are still thinking about it? How many didn't understand a thing I said at all because you don't want to expand your consciousness? Thank you for not raising your hand. Most men who are sons of God have a hole in the roof of their mouth just beyond the palate and up from the epiphyseal glands that leads to the nasal eye duct. I'll repeat that simply, and women, don't even waste time. If you are a real womb man, you won't have that hole there. The man will have it. If you take your tongues, men, put them near the roof of your mouth, near the teeth, and move backwards, and it tickles, you'll see again ridges, little furrows, and then a mound. On the reverse or obverse side, going back toward the end of the throat, near the larynx, and again the palate, up at the top, there's a lot of little soft tissue, and then you see a big mound and a little hole there, or an entrance to that cave. That hole is either closed or open, an indentation or big, depending on what kind of man you are. Now, let's take a whole minute while we do some homework in our mouths. Men only, please. If you find it, or if you already know of it, simply raise your hand. Okay? How many can't find what's there at all? Only one man. I have to talk to you. Peace. Okay. Just don't know where to look. There is, again, a little soft area. You have to almost, now don't start swallowing. I don't want anybody going into epileptic seizures here now. If you have a tendency, don't do it. If you take your tongue, put it near the back of the mouth and bring it forward, you'll see from like a little pithy area, a hard rigid adder, and right in the middle of that is like a little mound, and right at the base of that, the base of course is now transposed, it's upward. There's a little indentation. Then you slide forward, it's like you're going down a hill, you come forward to the teeth. Okay, how many men now can again feel that area? Let me just see your hands. All right. Now, That little opening on the reverse side of that little mound or hill is what a lot of transposition and literature has tried to hide from you. It separates the two kinds of man now on earth, and definitely separates human from man. It is your ability to go through that channel up directly to the pituitary pineal gland, and once a month, as in women who has menses, you have an issue of air or fluid that comes down there if you're in any way balanced. Most men, not being told about it, don't do anything about it, or don't even realize what it can do or why it's happening. After a while, without proper nurturing, it becomes like an airflow, and you may have noticed sometimes even once or twice a week, especially when you're more rested and not under the stress of a job or a job or a business, then you will see a little air coming down there. Just in passing, I like to kind of query my audience as you query me. How many men have ever felt that little air rushing down, or heard that bubbling and wondered where the heck it came from, and knew it was coming inside their mouth but didn't know where? Let me just see. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. That separates the fallen man from the original man, and human, the animal portion of which, from man who was non-solar. Solar plexus grounded man. Oh, boo. It's just 10 minutes? Okay, yeah. About 10 minutes? About 10 minutes? Now? Can I conclude in 1 minute? You can reverse this and take it back. 1 minute. All right, you can take it back up again. Okay, we want this on tape, so as a consequence, I'm going to have to conclude here now. Don't go away just yet. How many minutes will we have afterwards to fix the film? How many minutes will we have afterwards to fix the film? Huh? How many minutes will we have after I conclude this part before we can take up again while you fix the film? Two minutes? That's all that's necessary? Okay, why don't you just rewind it, stop it where you want it, and then we can go from there, okay? When we left off, and you might want to just hold the tape for a second or two as we try to recap what was done before that time, was the idea that man himself may be incomplete as to understanding who he is, and that the separation or term of man versus human may be different. And I state also that man, mankind, and human may also be different, but showing you again that the collective noun, in this case man, may be a dualistic, in other words, including man and woman, and that there is references in biblical and also in scientific research that there was more than one kind of man, if you would. I had also stated again about the various glands that man had and how they somewhat emulate that are found in women, but then we separated to find that there was an organ or gland, if you would, that man has, the entrance of which is at the top of the mouth, which woman has no part of, and that some men do not have on earth, and therefore that is one way of defining and understanding that there are two kinds of species here that we call man. One I would call human, the other I would call man. That's where we stopped, and that's where I'd like to now continue, if we will. Okay, again. In looking at man himself, we now see that this man with the divine cave, the legendary area by which man may go into himself and find out his infinite being, and open up many, many, many mansions of understanding as to who he is once he gets past what is called the cross of Calvary, or the crucifixion of the two thieves. The two thieves become, in this case, the nubal, ida pingala, pneumogastric nerves at the base of the spine, leading up to the base of the neck at what is called the medulla stem. The thieves, therefore, robbers, become that energy that is channeled backward down to keep man more an animal than to let man ascend to his higher consciousness and powers to become that of the gods or God himself. When man was said to be a fallen angel, it simply meant that man had fallen from the understanding of total consciousness, which makes him a co-creator on the thought plane. Was given a planet, therefore, lower in thought, where this could not be practiced until he learned what divine reality could bring, and therefore on this planet needed a mate, which was himself in the higher heavens. Now that may become difficult to stretch minds too, but as I understand in Philadelphia, you're beginning to expand consciousness at a great rate. So I say, for what it is, that is the conclusion that I would reach for man. To reach that conclusion for man, however, is to also understand that the prostate gland itself, which takes a rich vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin B complex to sustain, works hand in hand with the pineal gland. The pineal gland is best exercised at night between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2:30 a.m., and especially on full moons. This gland deserves total darkness in order to regenerate itself and cast what they call the astral light. That light reflects down to the base of man's spine while he is in a sleep state, and if the food intake has been rich in the vitamin B complex and the plant kingdom chlorophyll, it will also photosynthetically inundate the orchid gland, which then radiates back upwards, and the man becomes one. He becomes a living, walking, psychic being. Eternal emissions, and some call them nocturnal emissions, are emissions usually when that seed of light granted by the orchid gland is not raised up the spine, not used in extrasensory perception or in things which make man's question his very basic animal behavior. To do so is to raise man's consciousness, control one's dreams, and control what is called the astral body. To not do so is to seat in the sperm, ready for reproduction, to bring in a kind of soul that may continue to do that when man won't. And this is where then man needed a mate. To live is to know temptations. The term live, spelled backwards, is evil. The word live, spelled backwards, is evil. The word evil transposed is live. To have lived is to be backward and become the devil. The word devil, spelled backwards, is lived. Therefore, if one lives in evil and in ignorance, one becomes the life of the devil. Man is his own worst devil and creates then energy cycles which draw to them from wherever in the heavens they dwell, negative beings which can be termed devils. Impotency is as much a mental state in man's mind as is physical impotency. What man sees and understands and terms pictures from, he then brings to him. What man refuses to accept or refuses to see, he sends away from him. Therefore, man is surrounded by his own vibrations, and the vibrations that he holds in mind are man. Prostrate, as I said before, means to stand in front of the gate to the higher heavens. Prostrate, as I said before, means to supplicant to anything that can give you physical confidence and physical bliss. The reason why the sons of God, or the so-called angels, the energies from other planets, came unto man on earth was because earth was really a divine garden, a wonderful commixture of everything from the planet Sirius, or from the Sirius constellation, whichever way you look at it, Canis Major, and those that were rejected from the planet Orion, or in a higher consciousness, the phylum constellation of Orion in the Pleiades. Those two oppositions have battled for the energies that has become man and woman on earth to see who will take over the Garden of Eden, the planet Earth herself. And once again use one of the most beautiful planets in the cosmos as a zoo, or a deep, again, genetic phylum for mutation experimentation, and withdrawal. Because man has fallen here on earth, the progress of souls to the higher heavens has stopped feeding from the solar system, and man is bottlenecked with many energies and entities which we now call devils and lower energies. To stop that bottleneck and to let Earth change, as now Earth has come into the energy areas of another sun, is the problem and the challenge. The species who wants man not to progress will do everything in their power to keep man an animal and to bring out even more the animal side. The species who wants man to become as they are, and even more, because he has sustained the trials of time. Time is different, supposedly, on our earth. Wants man now to break the bonds of animalness and rise and ascend. The time for all of this that has been speculated on by many good books and bad authors is not in the distant future, but is upon us now. The weather changes and weather patterns that we see indicate this. The ozone layer peels back so that direct light can now come from the central sun, which will kill off all that is of lower vibrations and will bring down upon them the diseases of animals from which they partook. The conclusion of which can be only changed by the mind of man when he understands the power in his mind, and if he refuses to act, then human will be destroyed upon earth. Thus ends the man lecture. It is open for questions and comments. Not to forget, there is still a children lecture to follow. It's open for questions, comments, or so. Again, please use the mic so it can be recorded if there are any questions or comments.
Good evening, Dr. Blair.
Good evening.
I did not get a clear understanding of the distinction that you made when you started to make prior to the break. You were articulating about the location of the opening at the roof of the mouth, and I didn't get a conclusion to that.
Okay. The location at the roof of the mouth is just pretty much there. It is, if I can give proximity, because different skulls are different, it is roughly, let's just say, 3 inches from the back of the teeth at the roof of the mouth, which has a kind of a mantle and little ridges on it. You can kind of feel it, and it tickles. It's very sensitive area because a lot of nerve endings in there. Then there is like a mound, a hill, and then in what they call an obverse, or a sliding down, if you could make up down, in other words sliding backwards toward the roof of the mouth, there is a slope and a little cave like, or a little opening, and then you get into the pithy center leading back to the trachea and the palate and on down the throat.
I understood that.
Okay.
You had made there was a distinction between those who had that and those who did not. I didn't hear a conclusion to that.
Oh.
That's what I didn't hear.
Human is, in the intent of my understanding, animal man. It means a male in this instance that is part of the evolved animals and even genetically made animals of earth, with a higher kind of sperm cell, shall we say, a higher kind of a consciousness that was able to dwell on other planets, not only in this system, but from suns with high generative energies, that was bound to earth and then made to mate and produce what is now called human. I defer that man is not bound to the planet Earth, but is a gender of species around on all planets with or without moons. That human is the animal ingraftation of man on Earth and has now been able to proliferate and has gotten even lower than some of the animals by which the seed they have taken. And that mankind, which I really didn't get into and would prefer to get that on another lecture, but to make the Trinity complete, is a replicated, genetically spliced creature made by human and some what they call creator gods or energies that have done a lot of devastation on this planet as it is, which leads into a whole different, obviously, lecture.
So the opening implies the opening at the roof of the mouth means you are man.
Definitely. Okay.
Dr. Blair, you mentioned about that there was I didn't quite understand it, but there was a war, a fight, or a struggle going on between the star system, Canis Major, Canis Minor, Orion, and Pleiades. What was that? You say Pleiades?
It's okay. Orion in the Pleiades, P-L-E
Pleiades, yes.
in the Pleiades.
Orion, Pleiades. And Sirius and Canis Minor, Canis Major.
Okay, Sirius, I tried to oversimplify, and I don't think I did a good job at all. Canis Major is said to be a binary star, Canis Major and Canis Minor, in the system that we refer to now of Sirius. There are many smaller suns in Sirius, but only two major ones in this binary. And that from there, Earth is part of the furthest planets out of the Sirius system. We are part of the sun in Sirius. And that the energies which are on Earth have had a battle for some time as to which would rule this experiment here. The Syrians, of course, have more or less stayed in the background simply because the energies on Earth were not correct, and they had also deferred to a battle that was fought and lost it. Whereas the Iranians have had great input on what was here and even introduced a strong feminine quality on Earth. But again, when you understand that, you must understand that the energy field of Earth is composed of electromagnetic vibrations. In actuality, it should be a magnetic vibration only, and then higher consciousness can evolve here and maintain itself here. But like with the electricity that is killing us and hoping to set us back now, that's why we use electricity on Earth, and free energy is despised, because free energy would lead to magnetic propagations, would cause those who have, well, let me not say it that way, but those who have certain glands and organs that can vibrate higher to ascend to what they should be, and would cause a complete loss of the planet Earth to those of lower vibrations. So therefore, we've been given electricity, even introduced in what is called Earth's electromagnetic field.
Right, so the magnetic was before the electromagnetic.
Definitely.
And so could that be was that the influence, the Canis Major or Orion, could that have been the influence on the women? You said that they were
approached by the sons of God, and at one time it's even stated by the Native Americans, by the Ibu people, by the Zulu people, and by the Dogons, that there was no moon on Earth. Earth had no moon. But once that planetary structure was imposed by the Pleiadians, then they had control then of Earth itself.
Oh, well then the Dogon people have a connection with the Syrians?
Did the Dogon people?
Yes.
Yes, in fact, one of their phrases amongst the Dogons are, we're going to the dogs. Canis Major, Canis Minor.
When you would define prostrate, I didn't get all of that. You said anything that gives, was it pleasure? No, you didn't use that word.
Prostrate is to fall face down before something larger, or humble oneself before an entity.
Right.
Prostate is to stand in front of. It means almost to stand erect. In this case, the prostate gland stands in front of the bladder, and the mighty gland that is called the orchic gland, which very little now is taught. It is our inner sun.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Peace be unto you.
Peace be unto you, brother.
You spoke about the ascent of man on the planet here. Now, I want to know, with the ascent of man, is there a time limit? And also, what is the final destination of man in his ascent? And is there a parallel ascent of the woman, such as she's called? Is there a parallel ascent, or as it was running together, or is it a plane, or how to explain that?
Only human needs a mate. for hue man is incomplete. And even the hue by which man was formed from animal, the animal kingdom has killed off its inferiors, and they even now can have souls. Group souls they were. Now individuality and egos they have. You can see this now within pets who have individual personalities now, who will sometimes not even interface with other creatures of their own phylum, other dogs, other cats per se. Now that man in a sense has fallen lower than the animal kingdom, then that kingdom must now be left with a lower earth if earth is to graduate. All those are different lectures. Obviously, many of you are well read and understand some of the concepts about what time we're in. Also, that man himself was a duality or parthenogenic. He can now refer to what he can only release at night when he goes to sleep. The astro-etheric body, in which sex is non-entity, he can create through mind. That is complete man and woman, and they both can ascend. We now reach stages of that, and even when that was being reached, the medical society is so afoot to inject into our bodies serums which don't allow that ascent either more. They wish to ground us, those that have kingdoms other than earth.
Yes, thank you. One other thing, but in terms of these beings who are